Hello everybody, and welcome to this video whose topic is language in CLIL. So what aspects of language, especially when we're teaching a content subject, do we need to be aware of when using CLIL? So as far as CLIL is concerned, when it comes to language for content, we need to be aware of three aspects of language, three main aspects of language. As you can see here, vocabulary, grammar, and language functions. So let's talk about each one of these briefly so that we can understand what we mean. So when it comes to vocabulary, there's four types of or groups of words that we need to be aware of when teaching vocabulary. We've talked about content obligatory and content compatible language before, but there's also high and medium frequency words and collocations. So when we talk about content obligatory language, as we've seen before, we're talking about the language of the subject, right? If we're teaching math or chemistry or geography, there's certain vocabulary that is mandatory for basic understanding of that content area, or the lesson or the specific objective of that lesson. Right? So I may be talking about types of rocks when I'm teaching geology or geography. I may be talking about different types of classes of animals if I'm teaching biology. I may be talking about combinations of chemical elements and specific names for these combinations if I'm teaching chemistry. So in this box that contains an example or the definition of content obligatory language, you see two words, adaptation and carnivore. So if I'm teaching a class on animals, those are words that are specific to learning about animal adaptation. So animal adaptation is a concept, right? And certain types of animals are carnivores and others are herbivores. But those are also adaptations. Those are physical adaptations that I'm teaching my group or my class. So those are examples. But there's also content compatible language. And what is that? Content compatible language refers to everyday or less formal language. It may not be the most commonly used language or the most commonly used words in English, but they're more frequent than content obligatory language. So for example, if I say behavior, I can talk about animal behavior that's specific to science, but it's also a common word in other settings. I can talk about the word feed. Animals feed on each other, but I also feed my children or feed my friends when they come visit me, right? So these are possible uses of the words behavior and feed. So it's still used, it's still needed for mastering that content, but there's other levels of specificity to these words. They can be used in other domains or contexts as well. And then I go to high and medium frequency words. Those are the most often used words in English. So I may use the words eat or hunt. And those are, I can see words like this in cartoons every day on TV. We probably use the verb eat every day or close to every day because those are high or medium frequency words in English. And last but not least, when I'm talking about collocations, I'm talking about combinations of words that go together. So in every domain of knowledge, you do have words that go together, even informally speaking. But when it comes to this particular subject or objective of teaching animals and adaptations, so I may talk about a weak link or the animal in the prey group that predators gravitate to because that's the weakest member of the group and it's easier to be hunted, right? And I may talk about the relationships between predator and prey. Predator and prey are two separate words, but they're used together a lot to talk about predator and prey relationship, for example. So those are examples of collocations. Right? It doesn't mean that a word cannot be used outside a collocation, but it may be used in a different context. But the collocation has a specific meaning in a specific time or context as well. So let's move on to talk a little bit about grammar. So when it comes to grammar that is taught for CLIL, I'm talking about the grammar structures that will be useful in helping the students master a specific content area. So let's give examples here. So for example, if I'm talking about present, past, and future, they're used across different subjects, right? The past may be used a little bit more in history, and then, for example, the future, right? You may use history to predict the future, but geography or politics makes use of the future tense a lot more than history does. So those are some interesting observations that we need to make to ourselves before we choose what to teach. Examples are important so that the students know when it is used, and also, of course, the meaning. So I don't really need to teach everything about the present, the past, and the future, but I do need to teach those uses that may prove to be relevant for the students to show mastery of that content area. When it comes to modal verbs and conditionals, those are used across subjects in general, especially modal verbs. You can't imagine a situation where a modal verb like can or may or will or have to is not used. Conditionals also. And of course we have passive forms and reporting verbs and other verb forms. I'm not necessarily going to read the tables because you can just stop the video and read them carefully. But those are very good examples taken from Ken Bentley's book that helps us prepare ourselves for the TKT CLIL test, a book that I highly recommend that you acquire and use. And when I talk about language functions, I'm talking about two levels of language functions. Some of them can be language related. In any, let me not say any, but let me say most situations, if I'm learning a language, I need to learn how to agree or disagree with someone, how to ask questions, how to clarify, compare, describe, etc. Right? Those are almost universal functions that we use in language. But I also have subject-specific functions that may be specific to some classes that I'm taking. So I need to interpret data. But to interpret data, maybe I need to look at a graph. I need to look at data. And graphs and data, they come, or they're more connected to specific subjects, right? And I need to predict things. I need to study history and see what happened to predict what could happen in the future. I need to create hypotheses when analyzing scientific data or maybe numbers. So those are language functions that I need to be teaching. So from vocabulary to grammar topics to language functions. And that would be very, very specific to the content and the objectives within the content that I'm a teacher of. So I hope this has helped clarify the levels of language that we need to teach when working with CLIL. Thank you very much for your attention and for sticking through the end, and see you in the next video.